course those
No, I'm joking. I'm joking. But I just find that interesting. Now for you, my first question is, when during the event, is it the closing of the store? Is it as you get close to the, because as they said, they were always threatening to close. At what point did you say to yourself, well, I have two questions. I'm going to make a movie out of this. Like I'm going to make the movie. I'm going to do it. And number two, what was your opening salvo to get her to agree to be on film?
Well, she basically never agreed, as you can see. So it was kind of a constant battle of me just relentlessly putting the camera in your face, right?
She's like the Bob Dylan of porno bookstores. So you can follow me with a camera, but don't shoot me now. Don't film me.
Yeah.
Bring your camera and follow me for 6 months, but don't actually film me.
Exactly. That's wow, perfect analogy. Yeah, and in terms of the the first question, you know, I knew that the store was historically important for the LGBT community. It was just, I mean, that was my world. In fact, I don't know if you knew this, but when Josh wrote the note and threw it on the table, it said, "I'm gay." Dad later told me that he just assumed it was me, and I was like, obvious, and of course, you know, all my friends are gay, and I was waving my freak flag and doing gay protests and marches the whole time, and so I also was really amazed that Josh was so closeted. It came out as a shock to me.
I said, my first question was going to be, if you hadn't seen the film and you knew nothing about these people, which would you guess was the adult film star?
Star, wow.
Right.
Oh, Karen, I want to ask you what it's like for you to see the film these days, which I assume you've either seen a number of times or been in parts of audiences that have seen it.
It's a good film, but I don't like seeing it. It's had I known it would be so successful, I would never have agreed to it. That when you're the mother of an artist who does all kinds of creative things, you're never sure what's going to happen. And mostly, a lot of her stuff has been kind of, what's the word, niche-y, obscure, different, not very mainstream.
So if you only want to choose films in the future that aren't going to do very well, I can teach you how to do that. I can teach you that trick. Well, I mean, the soul of the film, of course, is this this tolerance that lives in your family. You know, your husband, and I'm not saying that in a kind of a cliched way that we throw that around now, inclusion and diversity and tolerance, but you know, back then, you started the business in '82. You and your husband are just beam a kind of live and let live quality. You know, you're very egalitarian in that way. Were you raised that way? Was that a lot of your own background? You would describe your parents and their cultural and political biases.
Well, first I have to say, we didn't start the business. The business was started in 1960 or so, and we took it over in 1982 and continued to run it.
What was the business like in 1960?
I assume...
Everything in a brown paper bag?
I assume it was pretty similar to the way it was when we got it. There was a section that was regular books, and then there was the adult material, which was mostly magazines. And when we got it, there was beta and VHS tapes. And then the VHS became V tapes. And so we took over a very good business that somebody else started. I forgot the rest of your question.
How your parents influenced the way you think?
Well, that's a hard question. My father passed away, and I kind of wonder how he would be with this movie. My mother's 95, still drives, still volunteers at the Sheriff's Department, is not a fan of the business at all, has not seen the movie.
Your mother knows what kind of line of work you're in. She knows. You've told her.
Yeah, she didn't know about the federal indictment. And
She doesn't want to watch the movie.
And I have
Or
a,
she'd learn about the indictment if she watched the movie.
well, there was a front page article in the LA Times when the store closed, and she learned about it there.
But when she saw that article, I came home and she was over, and it was face down. It was front page, LA Times, like you only get on the front page if you've done something historic. Because I've, you know, with my artwork, I've been in the calendar section of various things, but never front page. And I was like, this is, Grandma, this is so cool. Like, Mom and Dad's business is actually significant. It's historic. Like, finally, you can appreciate it. And she just, you know, she said, well, I can't show this to my bridge friends, so. That's kind of her.
And when you make that, I mean, you got so many wonderful moments and you are very funny. And they talk about, you know, with federal rap, one of you is going to have to go to jail. And he said, I'm so hoping it's him. The line was, it would be so right if it was him.
He didn't know how to cook the meals, he didn't know the kids' schedules.
The only thing he knew well was how to take the rap for a porn business. He couldn't do anything else. And he was a hell of a fall guy.
He's a really agreeable guy.
Well, we can see that he's lovely. Yeah, what would you this is a terrible question, but you think your marriage would have survived if he'd gone to prison?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
He would have found a way to enjoy prison.
If
Probably.
What do you think? Your husband would be the first like cheery inmate. You're like through those plexiglass things on the phone. You're like, hi, honey. He's like, hey, sweetie. You know?
If a marriage can survive a kitchen remodel and a federal indictment, it can survive just fine.
I'm in that scene when you're, we talked about capturing the Friedmans, and like you want to get away from that whole
Try to
stereotype.
avoid the reference.
Right, but it was when you're cooking that meal in your video, that wasn't him cooking a meal, like he was going to prison. It wasn't like a perceived last meal you had. You just were filming.
No, I was just filming him, and I was, you know, walking around with the camera as a kid.
You know, John Weston, the attorney in that movie, was just wonderful. And we had no idea what was going to happen during that time. It was a really, really hard time. But there was nothing we could do except pay legal bills and do whatever he said. So one of the things he said was to keep working in this business, because then they would have somebody to negotiate with. Because we would have closed it if he told us.
And you never, it was only gay porn, it was not no straight porn.
Absolutely, it was straight porn. It was
Straight
all
porn, too.
kinds of porn.
All kinds of
There is so much.
But it was more gay.
Well, there's sections with feet and with knees.
We need a sequel. We need a sequel. And which we know we do. We know would be a great sequel. We take you and your husband around the world. And you critique porn shops around the world.
I've seen that happen. You guys have done that.
We just kind of, when you see, I could look at it without really seeing it. I just knew sort of what would sell. It's not very interesting, really. I never knew why anybody bought anything.
So what made it real? I'm sorry. What was a product that even you and your husband, like you said, you spent all these years looking but not seeing, or seeing but not looking, I guess is the thing. And were you and your husband ever, like, your husband sit there and go, wow, now look at that. That's really a product. Was there anything that even impressed him?
No, my husband would walk in and say, there's a light bulb out. And all of these guys were playing cards. And, oh, I think there's a leaky pipe there.
Yeah.
He just fixed it.
You guys could have been in the donut business. It didn't work. Maybe that's the wrong image, the donut. Okay. What else you got?
Rachel, I mean, you must have learned so much about your parents and their store for making this film. What were some of the most surprising things you learned about them?
Well, I was also going to say with John Weston, the attorney, that was so fascinating because you guys always glossed over the whole indictment, like, oh, well, that, you know, it didn't happen, so just don't worry about it. But then John Weston, he also represented the people that made Deep Throat. He's like the top, like, obscenity attorney in LA, knows everybody in the industry. And he said to me, you guys were really, really, really lucky. It was really close. And that right before your case, there was another case exactly like it that was flipped the other way. and the guy had to go to jail for a significant amount of time.
This is the first time, actually, we've done this, we've done many of these programs, where I felt acutely self-conscious holding the microphone. So I do it all the time, but this show, I felt very strange. So
You could be in the
why am I
sequel.
holding the microphone? Now, I'm sorry, I feel very insecure right now. Now tell me, when you make a film, and forget about your mother and father and their career, when you make a film, is there I don't want to say impulse, but is it, do you leap and you say, I'm in, or do you do like a sizzle, or like, what do you, talk about investment, talk about this film and how it compares and contrasts to other films you've made in terms of how you go about making a film.
Well, when I set out to do anything, I basically am going to do it, and it's going to either fail miserably or it's going to happen one way or another. So this film, for me, my end goal was actually going to be sort of an LGBTQ outfest circuit. I knew that this was going to be important to that community. And I also, like my mom, just had no clue that a mainstream audience would ever appreciate it. And I didn't realize how much the backstory would matter. And my last film was actually as far from this as it could possibly be. It was a musical, entirely musical film. I am a musician. I did the end credit song in this film, and I sang along with my last film, almost like a live performed karaoke. And I toured with it in art museums. In fact, it's actually sort of set in this area. It's called The Lives of Hamilton Fish. And it's about two men that died on the same day. One was from a very famous family, the Hamilton Fish.
Fish Jr., we know.
Yeah. So his great-grandfather, Hamilton Fish II, died on the same day as the most notorious serial killer in all of New England in the 30s.
Is there a link between the two?
Well, that amazing link is that in 1936, on January 16th, the Peekskill Evening Star News printed their obituaries side by side. And I happened to discover this. Hamilton Fish, the worst serial killer of all time, truly. It's actually, I even met the guy who wrote the book A to Z on
So the
serial
serial
killers.
killer's name was Ham Fish as well?
Ham Fish, and then the other Ham Fish was Hamilton Fish II, the congressman of New York State. And I couldn't believe that this was, just these two men, complete opposites, died
So
side by
you
side.
take obituaries,
Take the obituary.
make a karaoke out of it, and that's what leads to the film. Is that what you're saying?
It was a musical film, yes, and then in order to make it actually a film.
But no sizzle. You don't have to do a sizzle to raise money.
That one, well, it was a really low budget film, so it was an art
What
house
about this
film.
one?
This one, I did have to get I had to get my ducks in a row. I learned about business, actually, in this film, because I had to create the sizzle. I started off with, a small kind of donation just to get the first year of filming done, and then halfway through, we had to create a little sizzle and show it to people, and I had lots of people say, okay, this looks kind of interesting, but, maybe not. Actually, Danny DeVito loved the sizzle. Somehow it got sent to him. And we had some really cool people who gave me the sense of like, oh, this is gonna be cool, it's gonna be funny and interesting. And so I just kept feeling motivated by certain people who were like, this is great, move it along, and then pulled together the financing with one really cool investor and one really cool donor. And then when the film was about to sell to Netflix and I had absolutely no ability to pay for post-production, my sales agent said, well, let me call this post-production house and we'll tell them it's gonna sell and we're gonna make a deal. And so I got, it's still a low-budget film, but it was cobbled together. So I now feel really good about the business that I learned. And then Ryan Murphy came on board at the very end because he knew about the store. He said it was one of the first places that he, as a gay man in LA, felt like he could go and buy materials, which was told to me a lot as I was doing the filming. And he wants and has acquired the rights to make a TV series. So you could be in this sequel.
Striker Force.
I have to think of a role. We told the audience.
No, if there was a movie about this, you'd have a guy that's a producer, let's say it's Harvey Keitel, and he's on the film with your character, and he's like, if your mom's not in the film, we're not putting up the money, you know what I mean? In the background, your mother's like, I'm not signing! I refuse to sign! Now, was it a little bit like you didn't walk around the house for the first few weeks and say, "Oh, don't worry, Mom, there's no film in the camera. I'm just jerking around." Like, at what point did you say, "Snap out of it, I'm putting a camera on you, we need to talk"?
You know, I think when I finally said to you, look, I have a producer, and we're gonna ask some questions, you agreed, and we set up that shot, right? Isn't that, I'm trying to remember too, because I really said, you know, we have to do this for the historical record. You did something important, let me just do this, right? I don't know what it took to convince you to do that first interview.
Well, you had people working with you, and I really thought they would lead you into some other kind of work. They do more work in film, and they don't do musicals.
They were pros.
The history of Torah.
Exactly.
But what's interesting to me is, and I hope everybody, you tell me if you agree, the audience agrees, and that is, you are, backstage, we were at the cocktail reception, and you seem so, timid, and you seem so, like half in. You're not quite comfortable with this whole world of you as the subject of this film. And yet you have more integrity, and you're more interesting, and you're more funny than the leads in the last 10 movies I've seen. So, look, you're so candid. I asked my question, what's your next film? What's your next movie?
It's not this.
Not the narrative version of this. Did you have any more? Should we open it up?
No, I mean, we can open it up. Is there anything that you really kind of hope people will take away from seeing the film and learning about your family's journey in the story?
I mean, the thing that I was really surprised about, it has been, we just showed it in Missouri. We've shown it in some really conservative places in this country, and I was nervous about going to...
What'd your dad think?
He's enjoyed every single screening. He's got a big smile. He's just, truly watches the whole film.
And your brother?
Both of my brothers are really into it. Yeah, I have. They're both really, really cool. My younger brother, when he, at Outfest and some of the screenings, people have come up to him and just said, your story is my story, and thank you. And they just really had that with Josh, because I think he represents a type. I was reading an article about Pete Buttigieg, actually. He was such a amazing student, every single thing, and it reminded me of the scene with Josh, just, an overachiever, and someone was telling me there's like a gay perfection thing where you're gonna be so high above the mark, and that's Josh. So to answer your question though, what I have found to be the most profound thing though is your religious reckoning, because I think that is this ongoing issue with our world right now, is how do we find a way to take these really dogmatic, ancient religious texts that are so disconnected to our present world and just make them relevant so we can love each other and be humane. And I think that's this amazing message that you articulate in the film. And that was a surprise to me that would be the core that seems to stick to people.
I must admit, it was nice to see a filmmaker double back and have one last kick at Ed Meese. I have to say that. I enjoyed that immensely. Are we going to raise the lights a little bit and take some questions? Do we have any mics in the house? We have a couple mics. Who's got a question? Anybody? You've got a lot of questions about porn. Come on! In the background?
Hi, thank you for both sharing your stories, and you both did an amazing job. And yes, you have a possible career in the film industry, but as the mom. But no, what really shocked me was, did you have any fears in the sense of we saw in the movie that your business was a cash business? It was, I don't know, historically, was it legal or not legal to have that type of store? Concern of your safety, the kids' safety, of what you were doing, or something could harm them, or people could go after them, especially having a cash business. And how was that in the sense of being an accountant? What really came to me is like, did the IRS ever come after you guys? I mean, in the sense of a cash business?
Well, first of all, nothing was illegal in that store. The biggest sellers of adult material are very, very big companies. So when this actress Tracy Lords was discovered to be underage in a movie, we were told to pull it off the shelves right away, and we did. The adult business is run in a pretty reputable way. Cash is a whole different issue, and somebody once said to me in the beginning, you know, if there's enough left over for you at the end, then it's probably okay. There's more internal theft than there is a fear of somebody coming with a gun. We had 3 locations at one time, and we had brings coming 3 times a week to each store. They carried guns. We were only robbed once with a gun. We had a lot of people who stole, including customers. But a lot of people, most people are honest and they don't steal. And the stuff we sold, you couldn't buy at Macy's. So they really had an interest in keeping us in business. I was never afraid of my kids being harmed by the business. I didn't want them judged or not allowed to play with other kids whose parents might have had trouble with that material. So, but when we were indicted, the IRS came because I think it's easier for them to look at your records than it is to do anything else. So they were rather confused because we had this dialysis business and we had this medical stuff and then we had this adult material. But we did everything by the books, and as my husband likes to say, like 5 years later, they sent all our records back. After keeping them for 5 years, they sent an overnight air express.
Federal tax dollars.
Your company sounds like when GE owned NBC. Dialysis machines and porno in the same office building. Who's next? Right, this lady right here.
I have a question about the narrative process you went through. It's such a layered story with, you know, the history and the bookshop and the coming out story and the transformation on the part of your mother. And my question is, did you know you would target all those facets off the bat, or did it unfold as you were going through the process?
You know, I did start having, well, this was a conversation I had with my editor, so very deep doc stuff, but you pile up your stories. And the very first time I met my editor, I actually needed to find an editor that had a background in porn, weirdly, because I knew that she would have to look at something. So I was asking around, sort of a segue to this, but I found the greatest editor ever. Her name's Catherine Robson, and she happened to have gotten a dissertation in pornography studies, which is a thing. A friend of mine recommended me to her, and she was able to look at everything, including just the ways in which the actual adult material could get cut in. And I knew that we had to, you know, keep the humor going, because it's weirdly funny and sad, and there's these insane, awful things like the AIDS crisis and Josh's crisis. But I didn't know, I actually came back to an interview with Josh later. There was an interview with me early on, which we ended up cutting completely because it just didn't work for me to be an on-camera subject. And I realized in order to get the back and forth with my brothers narratively as a conversation, I needed to be also part of the story. So that was sort of one big thing that came as we were piecing together the story. And you can only know that when you're making the film and realizing, oh no, this has to get put together.
Did you ever see Triple X, Timothy Greenfield Saunders' movie about the porn industry?
I haven't seen that yet.
Where he asks, and he's describing some of just the nuts and bolts of it, where the woman is the higher paid actor than the male. And they asked the women why, you know, what was the inducement for you to do this kind of work? They said money. I was doing it strictly for money. And the men who were, maybe not the stars who were paid good money, but the average Joe, if you will, in straight porn, he said he literally did the job to have sex with as many women as possible, that the sex was the draw. And I was wondering if it was the same in the gay world. Did you ever think about interviewing anybody in that?
Well, actually, I have a really
gay porn?
Yeah, I have a really good friend now who's a gay porn icon, actually, but he's known for being the first trans F to M female to male gay porn star. His name's Buck Angel. And Buck actually kind of did his videos as a type of activism because there were no trans people represented just nude and in the world, and you know, he actually did porn in order to make money, but also because he felt like it was really important for trans people out in the world to see sex happening between mostly it was gay men having sex with him as a man, but he was actually a female to male, so he's a man without a penis.
We have a couple more, time for a couple more. We have this gentleman in the front there, and then we're gonna go, we'll figure it out.
Thank you. Congratulations on the film. It was great. There's a lot of layers there, and was really something to see the transformation from the start to the end. So the question that I had was, in the beginning of the movie, and you know, you had the dialysis business, and it looked like you saw this as an opportunity for a business. At what point do you realize that this bookstore is a much bigger part of, you know, what's changing in society and the world and this country? I mean, was there any point, maybe when your son came out, or just at some point where you realized that this store was much bigger than just a hot commodity that you were making money?
No. You know, when you run a small business, you go to work every day, you deal with the plumbing, you deal with tax people, you deal with employees who don't show up. And at one point we had employees who were kind of ambitious, and we opened other stores. The store in West Hollywood was the first store and is the main store. The film portrays the store in a light that I never thought about, because
Such as?
well, the history of the fact that it was a safe, well-lighted place for people to find this kind of material. And I knew it was a niche business, but I didn't really think how special it was until we were closing, and the customers were lining up to do interviews with the camera crew that was there. She just picked a few people, but customer after customer after customer would come up to us and say, and some of them who are my age said, the store saved my life.
Well, just as the store, just as that is communicated in the film, the significance of the store in the lives of people, during the many years that you owned the store, were there times that you thought, because you know, you and your husband weren't two deadbeats. He invented this machine, and there were other things that the two of you could have done and succeeded at. I'm convinced of that. Were the times when you were running the bookstore that you looked at each other and said, we need to stop doing this and go do something else? But that it wasn't satisfying enough for you to run that store? Or was it? Did you know the significance of that community throughout your career?
The store was very, very profitable for a very long time. And so when you looked at doing something else, and we did try other things. He had a number of ideas, inventions that didn't go anywhere.
You owned a Bible company.
At one point, I have a journalism background, he has a photography background, and we were going to try and do a writing and photography assignment. And we bought all this equipment, and we took a raft down the Colorado River. And within the first hour,
That's crazy. I've never heard this.
we hit a wave, and our stuff was dead.
I already got her rights to this store. I'm making it look like this. You're out. I got her rights. She signed the deal at
I'm
the
really
party.
pissed right now.
Closed the deal at the party.
We tried other things, but it's a lot of work to start a business. And we had a literary bookstore for a while. that fail. It's a lot of work when a business fails too.
Yeah. We have time for one more. We have time for one more. Somebody on this side over here? No? Somebody, okay, the gentleman way in the back there. We'll take that gentleman against the back wall.
Hey, I just want to thank you for such a brilliant film. I was curious to know about the archival stock footage that was interspliced between the film and how you acquired the rights and the process of getting that.
Well, when you make a doc, usually you need to find an archival producer who you can work with that you ask for. Hey, I really need to find certain footage from this era, and so we have also a great archival producer named Rachel Morrison who just had amazing access to archives, and I wanted specific things, like let's find something from the 50s, it's black and white, that really reflects, when the men were getting shepherded into those cars and you could see the police. So that's such horrific footage, and it exists, and it's, police footage of men getting pulled out of bars and thrown into prison, and there is a trove. It's almost like you can look up anything you're thinking of, and there's actually archival footage. It's pretty amazing. One thing I was told that I'm very proud of is that in the AIDS section, there's actually a lot of films that detail the AIDS crisis. And someone said to me, you found some of the footage I've never seen before in any of these other films. And it was because I would watch other films and I'd say, I don't want to use that same shot because I've seen it in like 4 other films. And it's weird when you've seen the same shot in like 4 other films, you don't feel emotionally connected to it anymore. So it's really important for me to find unique pieces of footage I hadn't seen before.
Now, what's on the site of Circus of Books now? Do you know? Do you drive by there? What's there?
So we own the building, and we rented it to a store that's going to do kind of upscale adult material. But
Gigi LaRue is a former porn director.
Thank God, I thought you were going to say Trader Joe's.
Keeping it in the family.
But they want windows in the store. The windows in the store were taken out. And it's taken 8 months of something called historic preservation to hire a researcher.
Right.
And there's a
Circus
sign
of Books is like Sagamore Hill. It's a historic site.
And they're using this film as actual evidence as well, so this is further causing you problems.
Fantastic.
It's just annoying.
Hey, listen, I want to say this is the last of our 3 screenings this summer. It's been great this summer. I never complain about this, but boy, this summer did go by fast for me. And the festival begins on Thursday.
October 10th to the 14th. So stay tuned for updates.
Please come and
Follow
join us.
on
We've had a
social
great
media.
festival.
Thanks. I want to thank Deborah Halpert so much for her help all summer and getting everything ready.
And the staff of
And thanks everybody for coming out. And particularly thanks to